Falconry may only be a small part in mankind's role in sustaining our planet, but one that is central to the basic tenet of UNESCO's convention and one worth protecting for future generations, not in a museum, but alive and in the countryside where it was first developed. The baton of our falconry culture has been passed down to us from our ancestors. We cannot be the generation that allows it to fall.
L'IA est la participation multipartie prenante. L'intelligence artificielle fait déjà partie de notre vie quotidienne. Les institutions, utilisateurs, universités et gouvernements, tous participent à son développement. Si l'on veut promouvoir une intelligence artificielle saine avec des principes et des règles éthiques, il faut que tous les acteurs coopèrent. Chacun doit avoir son mot à dire dans une participation multipartie prenante pour déterminer comment rendre l'IA plus performante, plus sûre et plus accessible dans le futur. Il existe déjà des règles nationales et internationales pour encadrer une utilisation éthique de l'IA. Celles-ci devraient être adaptées au contexte et aux moyens disponibles localement. Tout le monde, des autorités aux utilisateurs de smartphones, devrait participer activement à ce débat. L'IA devrait bénéficier et être accessible à tous de manière inclusive. Regardez le prochain épisode pour en savoir plus.
Words have power. So do images. They can change lives for better or worse. But some people use messages that violate other people's rights to dignity, equality, and safety. So when does free speech become criminal hate speech? And how do we best respond to it? There's no agreed definition of hate speech. That's why, in some cases, those with privilege try and discredit critics by opportunistically accusing them of hate speech. Usually, hate speech is classified as derogatory or discriminatory language towards an individual or group based on their religious beliefs, ethnicity, race, or nationality. The UN Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech includes sex and gender. International
Testing,
law
1,
dictates
2,
that
3,
some of
1,
this
2,
speech
3.
shouldn't be protected.
Coucou.
In other words,
Oui, je
some
pense-
can be criminalized, only when it is linked to incitement to violence, hostility, or discrimination, and to racism. Two helpful guidelines here are the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, and the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, CERD. Additionally, the United Nations Rabat Plan of Action on the Prohibition of Incitement to Hatred advises us at which point specific speech crosses the line into causing violence, hostility, or discrimination. These three instruments have helped lawmakers define and courts to assess whether speech qualifies as hate speech and what to do about it. and especially what to do when hateful expression is not directly linked to hate crimes involving incitement and/or racism. While internet companies today have to obey laws prohibiting hate speech, there is a question of how they interpret and implement these laws in practice. There is also a question of how they treat hateful content that appears to be within the law, like whether they tolerate, delete, or downgrade it. Tech companies are working to address these problems, especially after advertiser boycotts and accusations that profits are generated by allowing hate to proliferate online, while not spending serious money to combat it. But the way they treat hateful content remains vague and hidden from independent research and public scrutiny. It's unclear when or why algorithms automatically recommend, downgrade, or remove hateful content or groups. And although they use artificial intelligence to manage the issue, this doesn't sufficiently cater for the context of words and images. The risk is that news reports on hate speech are caught in the net, while coded words and images for hate are not recognized. Another problem is inaction by the companies, even though with their data they can see when hateful content begins to scale to incitement and organizing of attacks. Key strategies to address this problem? First, promoting internet transparency is key if companies are to fall in line and deliver full respect for human rights, maintaining people's dignity and safety, while legitimate expression is allowed and indeed promoted. Second, ensuring that journalists are free to report and expose hate speech, working without fear when they call out leaders and their followers who whip up anger through insulting stereotypes and memes. Third, supporting citizens through building
Bonjour, assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon. So today's session, the next session will be with our author, Katie Evans, and it will be in English, but feel free to ask your questions in English or French at the end of the session. Is that okay with everybody? Ouais? En anglais, ça va? D'accord, c'est très bien. Mais si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas de poser les questions en français également à la fin de séance. Pour les gens qui répondent les questions ou bien participent dans notre séance maintenant, vous pouvez gagner un cadeau, très beau cadeau de l'UNESCO. Donc, faites attention à la présentation de notre présentateur, notre expert, Madame Katie Evans. Donc, voilà. Pour commencer, je suis Ming Lim, je suis le conseiller pour la communication et l'information pour le bureau de l'UNESCO, ici à Rabat. Bienvenue à l'espace de l'UNESCO durant cette Salon du Livre 2024. Donc, je vais présenter notre expert aujourd'hui, c'est Dr. Katie Evans. Dr. Katie Evans holds a PhD in Philosophy of Ethics, Artificial Intelligence from the Sorbonne University. She also holds a Master in Political and Ethical Philosophy from the Sorbonne and an undergraduate in Cinema Studies and Screenwriting. She left her native Vancouver 13 years ago to pursue a life in Paris, where she is now based. Currently, Dr. Evans works as a consultant and a scientific expert for multiple actors in the AI ecosystem. She was commissioned by UNESCO in 2021 to author a comic book called AI Literacy, Inside AI on an Algorithmic Adventure, which has been translated into over 5 languages. It's right here. So she is also the scientific lead in the ethics assessment program at the IEEE Standards Associations, which is as a lead analyst at the International Research Center for Artificial Intelligence under the auspices of UNESCO. And she will be teaching a new master class in AI ethics at the Sorbonne University starting this fall, 2024. Today, Dr. Evans will be telling us a little bit about storytelling and artificial intelligence, writing the future we want. So, let's welcome Dr. Katie Evans.
Hello, everybody. How is everybody doing? Okay. Give me a thumbs up if you understand what I'm saying, just so I get a feel for the language level. Okay. Ok, je peux faire ça un peu en franglais aussi, hein? Pas de souci. Okay. So yes, my name is Katie Evans. Thank you so much, Ming, for the lovely introduction. So what are we going to talk about today? So I think for a long time, we've told stories about technology, right? We've told stories since the time of the ancient Greeks about myths like Prometheus, where these are these super powerful machines with superhuman capacities. And they've always kind of colored human imagination. What's interesting is that today, between artificial intelligence and storytelling. But where we haven't done so well, I think, is when we're talking about what artificial intelligence is. Telling stories not about fiction, but about fact when it comes to artificial intelligence. So we recognized this problem a few years back at UNESCO, and we decided to do something about it. And the result is a 150-page graphic novel, Inside AI, an Algorithmic Adventure, right? So what I want to do in the time that we have together today is talk a little bit about the book, what the story is, a bit about how it came together and what we were trying to achieve with it, and then I want to do a little bit of philosophy with everybody and make a distinction between science fiction, which I think we all know, and what we call AI literacy, artificial intelligence literacy, which is what this book is. And once I make this distinction, then we can talk a little bit about how that worked in the book. Okay, so to start things off, I'm going to pitch the book. Now, since we have language issues, perhaps, I'm going to read it because it's a mouthful for me and an earful for you guys, okay? So, At exactly the same time, in 4 different corners of the globe, 4 young tech enthusiasts vanish from the face of the earth. Having challenged the unethical truth behind their devices, each of them has created a glitch in the AI ecosystem, opening up a temporary bad gateway to the zany algorithmic backend which lies behind our screens, a virtual galaxy called Plethora AI. Stuck in this AI-fueled digital microverse, these brave humans, alongside the intrepid AI researcher Dr. Y, have one option: travel across Plethora AI to correct the ethical imbalance their entry has caused and find a way back to reality before that gateway closes forever. So this is the general pitch of the book, and as you can tell, it's a little bit of an adventure, it's a little bit of a mystery. We have 4 young people that get stuck in this virtual universe, and then 2 scientists that live in the virtual universe that try to help them find their way out. And to do so, they have to solve kind of technological or ethical puzzles. Okay, so that's the general story arc. And now I'm going to break it down a little bit about what actually happens in each chapter. So, inside the book, there are actually 4 chapters, right? And I'll pitch them each briefly, just so we get an idea for the story. I think otherwise we're going to be a little bit lost when I talk about the other stuff. Okay. So, episode 1, Ari and the Parallel University. Ari's a pretty cool guy. He's a computer scientist, and he lives in a very rural part of New Zealand. So he's taking an online class to try to learn more about computer programming, and he tries to submit his homework over a dial-up connection. And if anybody knows what that is, that was the first way that we connected to the internet. And obviously that doesn't work, and boom, he lands in Plethora AI. And through this episode, we learn about something called the digital divide, which is just the idea that differences in access, so things like connectivity, things like resources, data, can make a difference as to the degree to which individual people can actually benefit from AI technology. So that's a little bit about episode 1. And then episode 2 is about a lovely young lady named Mariam, and she's super excited because she just got a new internship at a tech firm. And she goes to her first day at work and stands in front of the fancy security gate, and the facial recognition technology doesn't recognize her. Boom, she's back in Plethora AI. And in this episode, we learn about data bias. So the idea that if there's not enough data about a certain type of person or a certain type of lifestyle, then artificial intelligence only knows what it's been trained on. And so then it won't be able to recognize people that are different from what it's seen. And then episode 3 is a little bit different. This is about a young lady named Shirin and her best friend Abby. Now, her best friend has spent a lot of time on a content sharing platform, something like YouTube. And he's starting to watch some videos that are a little bit strange, right? So she's concerned that he's starting to believe in conspiracy theories and getting off into some kind of echo chamber. And so one day she decides to flag a video on YouTube for misinformation or fake news, and boom, her and Abby are catapulted into Plethora AI. There, she has to try to find her best friend in a never-ending maze that sort of represents this, this platform, something like YouTube again. And in this episode, we learn things like misinformation, disinformation, echo chambers, the ethics of online journalism, and about technical aspects like recommender systems, which is the type of AI that tells you, did you like this video? Well, then maybe you'll like this one too, whenever you're online. It recommends more content to you. And then finally, we have Joaquin and the unanswerable question. Now, Joaquin is a pretty philosophical guy. He likes to spend time talking to his voice assistant, so something like Siri on your phone. And he starts to ask it pretty complicated questions. Questions like, you know, what is it to be a machine? What is it to be like you? Boom, he's in Plethora AI. And there, his questions were so profound that he caused a type of black hole in this virtual universe that was starting to swallow the entire thing. And so Dr. Y and Emile have to go through the algorithmic universe trying to find him before he gets swallowed by this big question black hole. And in this episode, we learn kind of 2 things. First, stuff about how AI impacts the environment, and also how AI can help combat climate change through things like virtual twins or simulating natural disasters. But then we also learn about the distinction between humans and machines. What is intelligence? What is it to be a person? And what is AI? So this is sort of the outlook. Now you've all basically read the book. But the only other thing I want to mention, which if any of you have had any experience in writing science fiction or any kind of fiction that takes place in a universe that's not real, like not Paris, like not Rabat, usually it's very difficult to get your audience to buy into a universe that you've created, right? And so it's very important to be consistent across the story. But if you can tell, there's 4 different illustration styles across the book because there's 4 different illustrators. So the question is, why would we have decided to do things like that? Doesn't it just make it harder for the reader to understand what's happening if the characters are constantly changing and even the main characters, Dr. Y and Emile, look different in every episode? So the answer to that is that diversity is very important, not only at UNESCO, but certainly when it comes to looking about how AI impacts society. So we wanted to make sure that we showcased the degree to which AI impacts different places in the world instead of just one place. And so each of our illustrators come from a different corner of the world, and their job was to try to infuse the chapter that they drew with cultural aspects from their own background so that they could appropriate the story and that we had a richer tableau of what AI looks like when it impacts society. And in the end, I think not only it's easy to read across the episodes, but actually it makes the story much more interesting. Okay, so the tough part's over. I've pitched the book. Now we all sort of understand. Now I'm going to do the philosophy bit. Okay, so my question is, what is the difference between science fiction and AI literacy? Okay, so for me, I would say that science fiction, as we know it, we can separate it into 2 sorts of phases. The first phase is maybe the most familiar, I would say from the time of the ancient Greeks until about 70 years ago. And that's the phase where we use machines, fancy robots, futuristic societies, spaceships to explore human struggles. So we don't talk about machines because we want to talk about machines. We talk about machines because they represent something human, something like a political struggle, something like an oppressed people, something like a quest for meaning or understanding. So science fiction wasn't really about the machines, it was about the humans and what that meant in a metaphorical or allegorical sense. All right, so let's call it old school science fiction. Now, there's new school science fiction, I'd say in the last 70 years. So what does this look like? New school science fiction comes because now, in society, we actually are interacting with artificial intelligence. We actually do spend time with technology. And so it's not just a pure imagined thing, we actually have experience. So what this new school does, it takes our everyday experience with something like artificial intelligence and pushes it to its narrative extreme. It's going to make it as crazy as possible, even in a good sense or a bad sense, right? So we can think of things like Black Mirror, right? Black Mirror takes something like a voice assistant and turns it into a nightmare. Or we can think of something like Spike Jonze's Her, which is maybe a utopic version of this, where interacting with a voice assistant, which we all have on our smartphones, this voice assistant actually becomes truly intelligent, and so intelligent, in fact, that it leaves the realm of humanity and goes off with other intelligences never to be seen again. So this is the new school science fiction because it's just fantasizing to the extremes of what we know about what it is to live with technology. Just gonna let everybody settle in there. So then, if that's the 2 schools of science fiction, what is AI literacy? So obviously AI literacy isn't about human struggles. We actually have to talk about AI itself, and especially the interaction between AI and humans. And AI literacy isn't about pushing our everyday experience to its absolute extremes, because the point of AI literacy is to be pedagogical. We're supposed to teach people something about something real, in this case, artificial intelligence. So we can't go inventing capacities that AI doesn't have. We can't misrepresent AI. We have to be very scientifically accurate, because the goal is to give people the tools they need to think critically about technology and not to do that thinking in their place, right? This also means that when it comes to the types of conclusions we can draw as storytellers in AI literacy, I can't tell you what I think about AI. I have to find a way to tell a story that lets you decide what you think. Okay, so if that's the case, if it's pedagogical, if it's neutral, and if it's scientifically accurate, those are very hard stories to write. And they're also kind of boring a lot of the time, because a lot of really good plot ideas are not scientifically accurate, right? It's very difficult to write an entertaining story about exactly what AI does and nothing else, especially when we're used to science fiction. Okay, so if that's the challenge though, now I want to walk us through 2 specific ways that we address this challenge in the book, so you can get a feel for what it is to actually do literacy work. And these 2 problems are interconnected. So the first one is kind of basic. It's just about making AI accessible. So how do we convey scientific concepts in non-technical language? Okay, so the problem with AI is that it's not an object, right? It's not a piece of fruit. It's not a person either, drawing anything. It's a process. It's a field of study. It's a bunch of abstract concepts. It's mathematical equations. So how would you ever represent that in a way that's easy to understand without talking about math, right? Yeah, it's pretty tricky. So the way that we decided to do it was to broach artificial intelligence as a puzzle, a challenge, an obstacle, or a mystery for the characters that are stuck in this algorithmic universe. So you learn about AI not abstractly, but as a challenge that the character has to overcome to make it back to reality. So I'll give you 2 examples of what I mean by that. So the first is machine learning, which, if nobody knows what that is, it's one of the 2 basic ways that we do AI, right? Machine learning is behind almost every type of AI technology that you use in your everyday life. It's a very abstract concept. So instead of doing the typical mathematical formulas, we represented it as a game between a programmer and a bunch of ants in an anthill, right? So the goal of these ants is to look at the photo that the programmer shows them, in this case a photo of either a cat or a dog, and then the first row sends signals back to all the other rows, which are turned the other way and can't see what the programmer is showing them, until we get to the big fat ant at the end, who listens to all these signals and then says, okay, based on everything that I've just heard, I think it's a cat. And of course, if you see the next frame, this is often not a very successful process. It actually takes many, many, many iterations of this ant game for the whole ant hill to correctly predict what type of photo the programmer is showing. So that's one example. And now this one is a little more esoteric. So this is about data bias. How can we make people understand the concept of historical bias, which is just the idea that if you collect information about the past, let's say about the past of a particular corporation or business that's looking to hire someone, if the only data that you use to train your artificial intelligence system is the data that talks about past hiring procedures, let's say that firm has never hired a person of color. Okay, well, the AI only knows what it's trained on, so there's no way that the AI could know that a person of color is just as qualified for a job as a person of, let's say, European descent. Because how would it? There's no examples in the data that it was trained on. So in Plethora AI, what that looks like is a deep sea crab that lives at the bottom of a data ocean that's eating these ancient cave walls filled with historical data. So like I said, the information about the history of a hiring practice at a company. And what it does is it eats all this data, and then it lays 2 sets of eggs. One set of eggs is the candidates that it thinks are okay for a job, and the other set, not okay. Again, based only on what it's eaten. And of course, our character Miriam, she was classified in the negative class, so the class of unsuccessful candidates, but then she takes her egg and moves it into the right pile, the walls change, and then everything is better. So we took a very abstract concept like algorithmic bias and broke it down into something a little weird, but certainly more accessible. So that's the first problem. But then the second one, and this one's the most important. It's called avoiding the personification of AI. Should I depict artificial intelligence as a hero, as a villain, or as a character at all? Now, in science fiction, oftentimes, AI is either, all-powerful and evil, and it wants to take over humanity, maybe for its own good, or super intelligent and benevolent and is going to change the future and make our lives perfect, right? But remember, I'm doing literacy work, so I have to be scientifically accurate. So I'm not going to tell that story because the AI we have today is not all-powerful, not omniscient, not malevolent or benevolent. But then actually, if you think about scientific accuracy seriously, you have to realize that AI isn't a person at all, right? When we interact with something like ChatGPT or a voice assistant on our phones, we may have the impression that we're talking to a person because, let's say, ChatGPT responds with interesting responses, says something funny, makes us think about something, can hold a decent conversation. But it's absolutely essential to recognize that there is no mind behind the machine. There is no person on the other side of that dialogue. It's just an algorithm that predicts probably what you'd want to know or hear, or what the best response is given what you typed. So okay, if AI isn't a person, well then how could it be a character in my story? Probably can't be. But then, if AI can't be a character in my story, how am I going to talk about AI, right? So a lot of literacy efforts make this mistake, and they end up depicting AI as a cute, lovable robot that explains itself and says why it does the things it does and how it works. But that's not true, right? So this is the thing I think I'm most proud of in the way that we handled this. Instead of painting artificial intelligence as a character, we decided to make it the setting itself. It's the place in which the story takes place. So instead of interacting with AI, we're moving through it as we learn about it. So I'll show you what I mean. So this first thing, I was talking earlier about episode 3 and what it is to handle a platform like YouTube, a content sharing platform. So I could make this a person that shares content, or I could make it a gigantic and endless icy planet with a huge maze that users have to walk through, full of videos. So whenever you enter a website like YouTube, you're walking through this maze, right? Looking for content that interests you. But there's so much to see. So the recommender system, the thing that says, hey, you probably want to see this video, helps you navigate this huge maze. So, okay, again, I could have this cute little recommender robot that says, hey, you'd probably like this, but that's not how it works. So instead, we decided that a recommender system would look more like a compass, right? But instead of pointing you north, it points you in the direction it thinks you most likely want to go, given where you've already been in the maze, right? So it knows that you love cat videos, so it's going to point you more towards cat videos. So then once you see things that way, you might understand why, if all you ever do is listen to your compass when you're walking through the maze, it's only ever going to show you content that you've kind of already seen. And so it's easy to fall into very extreme corners of content because the recommender compass is just trying to find new things to show you, but you never change your mind about what you want to see. So it shows that you have a responsibility as a user every once in a while to type in a new search query and then start at a different spot in that maze. Another example is from episode 2. So again, this is the bias episode with Mariam, where she's trying to get her face classified for her first day at work in front of the security gate. So here, a database is represented like a vast ocean planet. But instead of fish in this ocean, there's images, because classifiers, the type of AI that looks at an object and says what it is, are trained on data. So then we have classifiers as these strange sort of robotic fish that swim around this ocean, learning from the images that they see. So then all Mariam has to do is find a way to get more images of her in this ocean so that all the fish, all the classifiers, will learn from faces like hers and then recognize her, right? So again, it's also quite beautiful. And I think it's easier to grasp something like the problem of correcting bias this way than if I explain it like a scientist. Okay, so that's sort of the end of my presentation, but I just want to leave you with one final point. As a researcher, I spent a long time thinking of artificial intelligence, not as a person, but as an agent, an actor, someone that has goals and achieves them in an environment. That's the very classic way to look at AI. Most researchers look at it that way. But because of this comic book, I had to start thinking about what I call artificial places, the ocean planet, the content maze on the icy planet. And at first it felt really weird, but then after a minute I thought, hey, it's actually pretty interesting to explore the ethical issues in technology if you imagine artificial intelligence not as someone who acts, but as a place. So for instance, something like social media. Would I really want to spend time in a place like Facebook, for instance, right? What would it look like if it were an amusement park? Would it be kind of weird that every move I make in this park, someone's behind me recording what I do and selling it to people, for instance? Right? So when you start to think of the experience as if it were a place instead of just something you interact with, you start to think about what type of future do we want, right? And that helps us understand how we would want to regulate this question and how we would want to hold technology accountable so that it gives us the future that we want. So I recommend that all of you take a look at the book. You can ask me any questions that you want about the book, but also about AI and ethics. And then, when you have some free time, think about the types of artificial places that you would actually like to spend time in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, chère Katie. Well, we are at the end of the particular session, but it's not finished yet because we have some questions for you. First of all, do you have any questions for Katie? Maybe we can start from there. Anybody has any questions? Because if not, we will go into a quiz, and then you will get a prize from UNESCO. So, let's start.
En français aussi.
En français aussi, c'est possible.
Pas avoir peur.
Ouais. Donc, Madame Katie, tout à l'heure, a expliqué plusieurs fois la différence entre l'intelligence artificielle comme un personnage et l'intelligence artificielle comme un endroit. N'est-ce pas? Quelle est la différence? Qui peut expliquer ça? Who can tell us the difference between using visualizing artificial intelligence as a person and artificial intelligence as a place?
Or maybe, c'est quoi le problème qu'on essaye d'éviter là-dedans? Pourquoi c'est pas bien de représenter l'intelligence artificielle comme une personne? Je vous donne un indice, ça a quelque chose à voir avec la science et de parler de la vérité. Peut-être qu'on a... Ouais.
Because there's no one behind the AI as a person. If we consider it as a person, there's no one behind. It's just a thing.
It's just an algorithm. That's right, exactly. That was exactly the right answer.
Thank you very much for the answer. And here's your very nice prize. You are getting one of Katie's very nice comic book,
And
Adventure in AI.
There's not that many in the world, too. These are very rare books.
And they are very specially made for the Salon du Livre. And don't worry about getting your answers wrong. We are not here to have like 100% correct answers, but we are here to have an exchange and have a conversation. Yes, sir.
Can you use the artificial intelligence and alien to discover the universe, the infinity universe?
So you mean, let's try to narrow that down. Can you use artificial intelligence, for instance, to explore space?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you absolutely can.
Because a lot of time we receive from the space the wave signal from aliens, and for the moment we don't have any information about another
Intelligent life, let's
Life.
say. Yeah. Yes, so
Thank you.
yes. I think what's interesting about artificial intelligence in that direction, like there's lots of uses of AI that pose ethical issues because they treat people in certain ways, they deprive them of opportunities. But there are some uses of AI that I think are just categorically good things, right? So using AI to predict climate disasters or simulate emergencies, that's a great thing because it means that we're more prepared. And to a certain extent, using AI to explore space and to detect deeper and better the things that are out there, especially because obviously machines can survive in much harsher environments than humans can. I think that's a wonderful extension of what AI can do for us and definitely supports the value of a quest for knowledge and maybe, you know, if there's anything else out there. So I as an ethicist and a philosopher, I have no issues with that.
Well, from outer space, let me ask a simpler question. In the comic that Katie just shown, there was an animal from the sea that eats the memory and the biases of people so that they can make a different algorithm, let's say. Do you remember what animal that was? Ah, not a fish. Was it a fish?
No, it wasn't a fish,
It
but there
wasn't a
was a
fish?
fish in the book. There
You
was a
have
fish in the book.
Another clue, you have 8 legs.
But actually, she's not wrong.
She's not wrong, right?
We should give her a book.
She's not wrong.
Because, yeah, we should give her a book.
Okay.
Because there was a fish, and the fish did learn from the data. So, yes, I will accept a
But
fish.
there was another animal that took a lot of biased data. Who can tell us what animal that was?
It was a crab.
That's it, that's it.
Thank
a
you
book
very
for
much.
you.
Yes, so you can refer back to what exactly was AI bias by looking at the very specific chapter where there was a giant crab.
It's episode 2.
Okay. Katie, would you like to ask a question for the audience?
Yes. Can someone give me one difference between science fiction and AI literacy? So there's the old school science fiction, new school science fiction, and then I talked about what AI literacy was. Can someone tell me one of the differences? There was at least 3.
The science fiction is not in the real life,
Right.
but the AI we can do some projects in our life based on the AI.
That's right.
The science fiction we just imagine.
Right. Exactly. Yes, that is, I'll take it. There is a difference because science fiction talks about fiction and AI literacy talks about the reality of technology. Yes.
Thank you very much. That was a very important difference.
A book for you.
I think that science fiction is about human being.
Yes, that's a good one. Very key. That's right. Especially like what I called the old school science fiction.
Another
before
correct
we had
answer.
technology. The idea was to use technology as a metaphor for what humans are going through. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. And I think AI literacy is scientific. It's not like science fiction, right?
That's right. That's right. Yes. You have to be scientifically accurate, even if that means that the story is harder to write or more boring. Yes. That's the point.
Wow, we are getting hot here right
That's
now.
it. Ooh. Okay, and then après, monsieur.
I have a question
Yeah.
about the artificial intelligence and ethics.
Yes.
You have said that we should not question the fact that the AI would be dangerous for our future, because it's something that is supposed to help us facilitating our life. And my question is, what are the limits to this tendency to give the AI this decisional capacity.
Yes.
Capacity to decide on our behalf.
On our behalf, yeah.
On our behalf, in many fields that are very sensitive to our life.
Yes, this is a very good question. So if I can rephrase it a bit, it sounds like you're asking me from an ethical perspective. We always think that AI can maybe be beneficial, probably because it automates things, it makes things cheaper, faster, easier to understand. But what are the limits to what we can maybe delegate to machines, right? How much, let's say, authority can we give them over decisions that impact our lives? Okay, so this is the question of this century, I think. So kudos to you, you definitely deserve a book. And to answer it, I think that there's two values that we never should let go of, and that we should try to establish limits around these two values. There's many that we could think of, but I'll think of two. The first one is autonomy, so the ability of a human to decide or to make decisions about their own lives, to pursue the goals that they want, to have the preferences, views, or beliefs that they want, and to not have to justify or change them, even if it's more efficient. So that's autonomy. And then also human dignity, which is that there are limits to what or how you can treat human beings. We have value because we're human and because we can think from ourselves. And so we have to make sure that technology doesn't undermine human dignity. There's limits to what AI can do to us, even if it's good for the climate, even if it's good for everybody considered all together, right? So as long as we respect autonomy and dignity, it'll at least help with all of this. The question is how to do it in practice, right?
And of course, under the UNESCO recommendation on AI ethics, there is such a thing called human in the loop. So always to ensure that the decision is not 100% taken by AI, but there's always a possibility of human intervention to provide the final decision. So that is a very important, very related concept to what Katie and your question have just alluded to.
And I think, yeah, up here.
Bonjour tout le monde. Bon, ma grande question commence par l'objectif de l'intelligence artificielle, partant du fait quel est l'usage, quelle est la valeur ajoutée qu'on voudrait, et surtout pour les gens comme moi, par exemple les seniors et tout ça, comment ils vont s'adapter à cette nouvelle situation avant, sinon, ça d'une part. D'autre part, alors on parle de l'intelligence artificielle, il y a un océan. On parle de l'intelligence artificielle OpenAI, on parle de ChatGPT avec les évolutions de ChatGPT 1, 2, 4, et maintenant on parle de ChatGPT O. Est-ce que vous pouvez un peu nous éclairer, clarifier rapidement ça pour le prof,
Yes. Oui, en français peut-être.
Oui,
c'est ça.
en français,
ouais? Okay.
Si vous voulez.
Du coup, première question, quelle est la valeur ajoutée? Deuxième question, qu'est-ce que ChatGPT? C'est quoi ce truc? Qu'est-ce qui se passe avec? OK. Donc, principalement, quand on parle de la valeur ajoutée de la technologie, ça dépend beaucoup de avec qui on a affaire. Si c'est des producteurs de l'IA, bah forcément, ils vont avoir une idée plutôt figée, mercantile. Du coup, on va dire que, par exemple, l'intelligence artificielle, ça accroît la productivité, ça minimise des coûts, ça rend des choses plus efficaces. Toutes ces argumentations un peu économiques autour des secteurs qu'à la base, peut-être qu'on n'a pas besoin d'innover autant que ça. Donc, après, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, il y a des utilisations de l'IA qui sont vraiment bénéfiques pour l'humanité. Par exemple, l'exploration de l'espace, ça blesse personne, à part peut-être enlever des ressources pour d'autres domaines. Mais d'autres, comme j'ai dit, les simulations des dangers de changement climatique, appréhender des crises, ou même il y a aider la participation démocratique, par exemple, par faciliter l'accessibilité des services publics ou la participation lors des élections et tout ça. Parce qu'on peut peut-être toucher plus de gens avec une technologie si on peut automatiser quelque chose. OK, donc voilà, on peut dire ça. Après, moi, je suis experte en éthique et donc naturellement un peu critique Donc j'ai plein de raisons pour dire qu'on n'a pas besoin de l'IA dans pas mal d'endroits. Mais mis à part ça, la question du chat GPT, qu'est-ce que c'est? Déjà, parce que j'ai un public devant moi, je me sens responsable de vous dire que l'IA n'est pas plus intelligente que nous, ok? C'est pas un être humain, c'est pas une tête ou un esprit pensant, et c'est pas quelque chose qui va nous dévorer la vie, le travail, l'importance, la dignité, tout ça. Si c'est le cas, c'est un choix politique quelque part, mais pas une nécessité technologique. Parce qu'en soi, tout ce qu'on a aujourd'hui, on a ChatGPT ou ce qu'on appelle des Large Language Models ou de Generative AI. C'est impressionnant hein, parce que ça semble pouvoir répondre à n'importe quelle question et on peut lui demander de faire des choses complètement dingues comme écrire un poème sur mon chat roux et il fait un truc non seulement hyper rapide mais super drôle. Mais le problème avec ces technologies-là, c'est que même s'ils sont très performants initialement et impressionnants, derrière, ils n'ont jamais vraiment la même réponse deux fois. Parce que, encore une fois, ils comprennent rien. Okay? C'est juste qu'ils mangent l'Internet une 30aine de milliards de fois, et puis par la suite, ils disent, bon, d'après tout ce que j'ai vu tant de fois, je me dis que c'est ça la réponse que tu veux. Donc c'est presque comme une génie dans une bouteille, où tu lui poses une question, il sort et dit, bon, mais le lendemain, quand quelqu'un d'autre lui pose la même question, c'est complètement différent. Donc, quand on pense à mettre des choses comme ChatGPT dans l'environnement de travail pour remplacer l'humain, quelque part, c'est l'argument de marché de quelques compagnies qui sont en train de développer ça. Mais il faut comprendre que c'est jamais consistant. Du coup, si on ne peut pas dépendre d'une machine de nous fournir toujours la même réponse pour une question clé, on ne peut pas se fier à elle. Et du coup, finalement, c'est assez intéressant, divertissant, mais ce n'est pas menaçant pour les êtres humains et le valeur ajoutée que nous, on apporte partout là où on fait quelque chose.
C'est toujours comme ça, on n'oublie jamais le fait, même si une technologie est très merveilleuse, il y a toujours une limitation pour n'importe quelle technologie, y compris l'intelligence artificielle.
Yeah.
Très bonne question, merci beaucoup. Voilà. Et vous, monsieur?
Oui, merci. Hello.
Hi.
In your presentation, you talked about AA, and you said that it's something is powerful and help us to achieve the information quickly. So, what do you think about that? I have a question you know, the AI, it's something who limited our immigration, our imagination, and limited our intelligence, like that. I hope that you understand my question.
Okay, so let me see if I got it right. So AI is very fast, it's very powerful in terms of processing, and so maybe we couldn't imagine exactly what it can do? Is that your question? Like we can't see where it would go, or we can't imagine it, or is it that we're competing against it? Yeah. Oh. Think about it. Yeah. Ah, pour réfléchir sur... Ah, ok, non, d'accord. Bon, bah là, c'est bon. Du coup, ce que monsieur avait dit, c'était que la vitesse de la technologie, quelque part, ça ne nous permet pas le temps de réfléchir sur ses effets et notre interaction avec elle. C'est un peu ça. Ok, so, you know, the speed of technology is such that we don't even have time to think about what's going on or, you know, how to interact with it and what are the consequences. That is a very good point, sir. Yes. Ironically, what's funny, when they started to push ChatGPT, some of the major companies developing it, which I won't name, it was able to respond instantaneously to the question that you ask. And the developers thought, oh, we're probably going to need to actually make an artificial time, so the machine has the response ready right away, but we're going to make it wait a couple seconds as if it were thinking about something so that the exchange felt more real. Think about that, right? Why would we want to design an AI that pretends that it needs to think about something when it's not thinking at all? Who's that for, right? Who is that for? So, but this is the issue, because I think outside of interactions with ChatGPT, obviously you're going to feel like the hardest question you could possibly answer, it's going to answer right away. And so that's kind of jarring, but I think more largely the speed at which technology affects things, like affects social circles, affects areas of life, and how quickly it progresses, yes. That's a very big challenge for regular people to be able to keep up with what's happening, to even understand what's happening. And to a certain extent, it's a big challenge for law and government to catch up with how to make it safe for humans, right? Because it keeps on developing and improving super quickly. I want to make a point here, though. It's not the AI that's deciding itself to develop itself and improve itself, okay? It's the people developing the AI that are releasing these products as quickly as possible because they're in very intense competition with each other, and there's only a couple players that really have a stake in that game. So let's not put the concern on the wrong people. It's not the technology. It doesn't decide to launch itself. It's the, let's say, the ethics or the ethos behind it that says, as fast as we can, move fast and break things, because that's what it is to innovate. And my question is this really the right way to innovate when we're trying to build technology to benefit humanity? And the answer is probably no.
Thank you very much, Katie. We have two more responses, so let me give to the young lady over here, and then I'll go to you, madam.
Merci. Alors, ma question, c'est est-ce que l'UNESCO, aujourd'hui, travaille sur un programme de formation pour les enfants pour qu'ils deviennent outillés à l'IA?
I feel like this is probably a collective answer question. Du coup, déjà, la bande dessinée, ça avait un peu ça comme but, quoi. C'est pour ça que c'est disponible aussi en open access sur le site web d'UNESCO et publié dans plusieurs langues. L'idée, c'est qu'on peut l'intégrer dans les programmes scolaires et tout ça pour susciter un débat autour de la technologie. Du coup, ça fait partie du programme UNESCO sur ce sujet. Après, peut-être que mes collègues, ils savent un peu mieux sur les autres activités qui sont en train de se passer là-dessus actuellement, à part aussi, bien sûr, la recommandation de l'UNESCO sur l'éthique de l'intelligence artificielle. Mais ça, c'est plutôt gouvernance que strictement outreach.
Oui, vous avez complètement raison. Cette bande dessinée, effectivement, c'est un outil pour sensibiliser le grand public, y compris les enfants, à propos des concepts, les idées, les théories de l'intelligence artificielle. Et nous sommes vraiment en train de développer plusieurs activités, plusieurs programmes, y compris les outils, les manuels, les pédagogiques. Concernant ça, ça va prendre un petit peu de temps, mais c'est sûr, nous sommes déjà en train de développer. Par exemple, en ce moment, on a déjà un outil pour une formation avec les acteurs judiciaires et aussi un outil pour les journalistes qui veulent couvrir le sujet de l'intelligence artificielle. Donc petit à petit, on ajoute notre outil, notre guide, notre manuel sur ce sujet. Donc merci beaucoup pour cette question. Madame, vous avez une question aussi?
Oui.
Bonsoir, merci pour votre intervention. Alors moi, ce que je voulais vous dire, c'est que l'intelligence artificielle maintenant, on est ébahi devant et on est curieux de savoir ce que c'est. Et c'est vrai qu'il y a des utilisations multiples de cette technologie. Mais et là, vous parlez d'éthique, et je me dis, est-ce que l'éthique a sa place dans ce monde qui nous bouffe et qui est là, qui est présent et qui est tentaculaire et on a l'impression qu'on ne peut rien faire. Et c'est sûr que toujours l'argent, c'est l'argent qui un petit peu mène le monde et qui trace la route pour tout. Et est-ce que c'est pas une guerre perdue déjà? Et surtout pour des pays comme le nôtre où on est consommateur. Et même les cerveaux marocains qui pourraient faire quelque chose, ben, ils ne sont pas là, ils sont ailleurs. Et donc, vraiment, moi, je regarde ça effaré. Et voilà, on est là, les bras croisés, et on regarde ça arriver. Et voilà. Merci.
Ouais. Ouais, merci pour la question. Ouais, c'est une très bonne question et très profonde aussi. Du coup, plusieurs réponses. Alors, évidemment, je suis experte en éthique et je bosse dans la technologie. Donc, je vais dire un truc style, bah, bien sûr qu'il y a de la place pour l'éthique, sinon je n'aurais pas de boulot. Donc, voilà, ça c'est une réponse superficielle. Plus profondément, il y a des entités comme l'UNESCO qui militent pour que les droits humains et les valeurs et les principes éthiques sont au centre de la gouvernance de cette technologie à l'échelle internationale. Ça, c'est encourageant. Ce n'est pas parce que je parle pour l'UNESCO aujourd'hui que je suis en train de vendre ça comme idée. C'était vraiment incroyable ce qu'ils ont fait dans le sens où ils ont dressé toute une liste de valeurs ou de principes ou de choses où on peut dire stop, non, dès que ça commence à faire ça, non. Et ça, maintenant, ça sert comme la base de pas mal d'efforts législatifs sur la question. Le problème, c'est qu'on existe encore dans un moment où on a beaucoup d'accès à la technologie, mais très peu de régulation, de gestion, de gouvernance de ça. Mais ça va venir. Ne vous inquiétez pas. Donc c'est normal qu'on se sent un peu ébloui par ce truc parce que on a très peu de connaissances sur comment ça marche. On a beaucoup de désinformation sur ses capacités et on se sent un peu délaissé par rapport à la capacité d'être protégé dans un sens un peu civique. Du coup, de l'autre côté, je peux dire qu'il y a des choses qu'on peut faire aujourd'hui pour se protéger contre les choses les plus néfastes qu'on peut rencontrer en s'engageant avec la technologie. Par exemple, chaque fois qu'on est en train de je sais pas, passer du temps sur Internet ou visitant un site web, on me demande si on veut accepter les cookies. Donc j'explique ça dans le livre. Il ne faut jamais accepter les cookies. Jamais, mesdames, messieurs, parce que ça veut juste dire, OK, à toutes sortes d'entités qui prennent mes informations et qui commencent à me tracer sur mon chemin technologique parmi tous les sites que je visite, et ça vend cette information aux parties tiers. Du coup, juste en supprimant les cookies, donc on ne les accepte pas, et puis quand on va sur notre navigateur, on peut les effacer. Si on fait ça, on devient à nouveau anonyme à tous ces acteurs, et ça change tout. C'est pour ça que du coup, on serait moins confronté aux publications, aux annonces qui nous incitent à faire des choses qu'on ne veut pas faire. Moi, je veux acheter une paire de chaussures, j'ai pas assez d'argent. Tous les jours, 5 fois par jour, je vends la même paire de chaussures. Horrible, parce que je termine par les acheter, même si j'ai pas les moyens. Juste parce que je suis exposée à ce contenu. Donc, en se protégeant comme ça change toute la donne, juste pour commencer. Et puis, il y a d'autres exemples dans le livre de choses qu'on peut faire pour se bâtir un peu contre ça, mais déjà juste de mieux comprendre le sujet, parmi encore, à travers le biais des choses comme ça baisse notre peur qui vient de notre mécompréhension du sujet. Parce qu'une fois qu'on est empowered, comme on dit en anglais, une fois qu'on comprend vraiment les enjeux, on se sent un peu moins tout petit par rapport à cette technologie complètement envahissante. Et donc là, on pourrait mieux comprendre comment ça se passe derrière, quels sont les enjeux, quels sont les intérêts, et mieux agir contre, ou en tout cas ne se pas laisser faire si facilement.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, on a besoin de conclure notre séance aujourd'hui avec Dr. Katie Evans. Je vous remercie encore une fois pour votre participation. Vraiment, c'est un sujet assez nouveau. Donc, même pour nous, c'est un chemin d'apprendre. Donc, c'est pareil pour tout le monde. Et j'aime bien, comme Kiki a remarqué tout à l'heure, si on apprend de plus, on peut se sentir moins petite.
Voilà, moins vulnérable.
Voilà, pour ça. Et puis, encore une fois, je remercie aussi Katie pour la présentation. Merci beaucoup. Et à vous aussi, merci beaucoup. Et on se voit peut-être pour la prochaine séance demain. OK, merci.
À 11. 11 heures, il avait dit, Ming. OK.
East African women dancers, and to help with this, we're giving